Mr. Michael Riley. Mr. Riley, thanks for joining us.
How are you?
Good to
Nice
see you. We're joined as well by Michael Gardner, who was with us 2 years ago. Good to see you as well. Ms. Cara Russo is with us. Cara, it's good to see you again.
Good evening, everyone.
Back. Good to see you. And Donald Robio. Thanks for coming in, Don. Good to see you as well. WPRO Primary Debates brought to you uninterrupted by Dunkin' Donuts. America runs on Dunkin'. We thank Dunkin' for their continued support to bring these important debates to you interruption-free. We do have a program note before we get going. For those interested, video is now available. Last night's Democratic debate. The first congressional district candidates, David Cicilline and Anthony Gemma. Again, that's available to you at 630wpr.com. We will also have video and audio highlights available, again, at the same place, 630wpr.com, after our debate tonight. For those interactive, you can join the WPRO personality, staff, and listeners for a live tweet chat, which will be occurring during the debate by logging on to 630wpro.com. You can follow the link to live chat, or you can log on your Twitter account and use the hashtag WPRO debate. So we'll look forward to those of you who are interested in doing that. Without further ado, let's get to the opening statements. We have gone in alphabetical order to both begin and end our debate, so we will start with an opening statement with Mr. Michael Gardner. Mike?
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be speaking with you. Many of you have seen me out in the last week or so with my sign, Michael Gardner, the American Dream, the American Way. I'm running for Congress, and why should you replace your six-term incumbent? Well, you know, famously, he toes the party line. And while that may be okay, there was one thing he did that I found very upsetting. For the last several years, he took one moment of fame from 60 Minutes, and where he berated industry executives on cybersecurity. And what he did, and he's basically traded on that ever since, failing to really do anything about the economy. And I think what we do have to do is simply move past that cybersecurity issue, focus on the economy. And I did disagree strongly with his violation of separation of powers by proposing to put cybersecurity in an agency under the White House. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike Gardner. We'll move on, Mr. Michael Riley. Mike.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me tonight, all of you that are in this room. There's about 10 of you around, for those who can't see. Rhode Island and the United States are in a very difficult circumstance, and that's in regard to its economy. Washington is basically broken and doing nothing to change. Rhode Island is broken as well, as many of you know. Rhode Island needs economic growth, and it needs it now. 4 years of the worst economy since the Great Depression has left Rhode Island with the second highest unemployment rate in the United States. Our #1 export has become young college graduates. America's economy drives Rhode Island's economy. If America prospers, Rhode Island will prosper. It's that simple. Let's face it, there are two facts. If our current leadership in Washington, including James Langevin, knew how to fix the economy, they would already have done so. They don't know how to fix it. Second, if the economics profession understood exactly how our economy works, we wouldn't be in this mess.
Gotcha. Well, you'll have a chance to continue some of these themes later on with your opening statement. Thank you, Mr. Riley. Let's move on to Donald Robio. Mr. Robio.
Thank you for inviting me. The reason that I'm here tonight is basically because we're sick and tired of seeing what's been going on. This current administration has not done anything or addressed any of the serious problems that we're facing today. We have to stop the bailouts, the stimulus packages, and redo health care so that everyone can be covered and everyone can afford it. You know, just one simple thing of approving the Keystone Pipeline would certainly have helped a lot to stimulate the economy and bring jobs to America. And also, another problem that we're considering is you have to close the borders, we have to eliminate safe cities, fine companies severely for hiring illegal aliens, and just do what we're supposed to do that's right. Here is a man that taken the governor of Arizona to court and suing her for doing his job. That's egregious, you know, it's something that just can't continue to go on. So that's my reason for wanting to get into the race, to go to Washington and see if I can kind of straighten things out.
Thank you, Don Robio. Cara Russo, an opening statement.
Hi, my name is Kara Russo. We all know that now is the most important and crucial moment in American history. Our very freedoms and our very rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are under direct attack. We know that issues ranging from high gas prices to unprecedented attacks on our religious freedom, to our $16 trillion national debt, to the loss of 50,000 manufacturing jobs per month since Langevin has been in office, have not been addressed. Now is the time to have these issues addressed for Rhode Islanders. To tell you a little bit about myself, my family has fought for freedom since the founding of this great nation. I'm actually a direct descendant of the only Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence, Charles Carroll of Carrollton, Maryland. And you know, I stand for freedom. I stand for the right for the public to see and hear from the candidates. I do want to mention quickly that if there was any confusion, Christopher Young was excluded. He was blocked from yesterday's District 1 primary debate. It wasn't like someone forgot about him or whatever. He was directly excluded, and I stand against that. I feel that the public has the right to see and hear from all the candidates.
Kara, thank you for your opening statement. First question is going to go to Mr. Riley. There was a little upset here yesterday at the last moment. Your campaign called us after assurances that you would be here for the debate to say you weren't coming to the debate. Thankfully, that got rectified to see you here. But it would lend some to have concern. After all, you govern the way you campaign. You are the endorsed candidate. What happened? Is there a lack of credibility in your campaign? Does the right hand know what the left is doing? It was very unusual.
Well, I am the right hand and the left hand, so my right hand knows what my left hand's doing, except when I'm golfing. With regard to your comments there, and does it affect the credibility of the campaign? The fact of the matter is, this is the most credible campaign that's been run for this office in the last 12 years. I have already spent 2.5 times the amount of all 5 other candidates put together. I have spent time, I have spent effort, I have 40 employees. We are running a major operation. The credibility issue just isn't on the table.
Okay, so what happened? Was it just logistical?
I had a conflict. I actually was supposed to be with Mayor Fung tonight.
Okay.
And Mayor Fung and Scott Avedisian, as you know, recently endorsed me. We had set up a visit to a senior center and a photo op for that endorsement, and that was going to be a front page thing. Well, now it's not going to be.
Good. Okay, well, it's good to see you here anyway.
All
So,
right,
Kara Russo, your thoughts?
Yes. Well, I think that it's important to take an opportunity when you have one to be, when you're going to reach thousands of people, and that it really is the most important place to be, just because you can reach more people through by being in this debate than pretty much any other time commitment that you could have.
Gardner.
Well, Mr. Riley's website doesn't outline an economic plan, and that's the whole core of his candidacy, that he has special expertise from his days as an Amex options specialist on the floor of the Amex exchange, that buy low, sell high experience makes him the only guy who can tell this nation where to go economically. And the fact is, if you look on his website, I don't see any evidence of an economic plan whatsoever. So if Mr. Riley thinks that a photo op with Mayor Fung, who frankly endorsed him because he said, in his own words, said, well, he put up the money, well, that's it.
Don Robio.
I really don't understand what the conflict is here. What is the question?
The question is the question was to Mr. Riley. You govern the way you campaign. At the last minute, if you pull out of a debate like this.
Oh, okay. I kind of miss that. If you have a scheduling problem, I think you should honor the first person that you promised to be with. And I don't know how that worked out, if he promised to be here or to be there. But, you know, you just have to make sure that you keep track of, keep all your things in order so that you know what you're doing. I certainly would not have made arrangements to be here and then dropped out for another scheduling problem.
Final word on it, Mr. Riley?
I didn't. I'm here, and if you needed to see my economic plan, it's called the Riley Plan. It's on my website. Apparently you don't read it. And it's right here, and the economic part of it is right there. So.
Thank you very much. I'm joined by my colleagues on the WPR Morning News on the panel of the debate, Andrew Gobiel and Tara Granahan, who is with us. Let's move on to the questioning. Tara Granahan is with us, and she has a question for Kara Russo.
Good evening, everyone. Kara Russo, this question to you. The battle over abortion rights has come front and center again after a Republican candidate for the Missouri Senate stated it's rare for a woman to become pregnant in the case of, quote, a legitimate rape. Is that your belief as well, and do you believe there is such a thing as legitimate rape?
Rape is always a horrible, violent, inexcusable act. I think that Aiken misspoke, but what it's been used as, and he obviously amended that and explained that he was, completely wrong in how he said that. But what people are using that as a political football to try to sort of promote the extreme and radical pro-abortion agenda, I think, is really despicable. When, babies feel pain, they're ripped apart. Literally, their arms and legs are ripped off of their bodies. And I don't think that even the babies who are conceived in rape, those babies are just as alive and just as innocent as babies conceived through consensual sex. So I think that if you're going to respect life, this is kind of wandering away from your original question, but candidates who give exceptions and say, well, I'm okay with, I'm pro-life except for in cases of abortion or incest or these things. Well, you're either okay with babies being ripped apart and killed a horrible, painful death, or you aren't.
Abortion in the case of rape or incest?
I don't, because it's a horrible thing for the mother to have to go through the first time. The horror and tragedy of the rape. The rape is not. You're not unraped by then killing your child. You just have an additional tragedy that you have to deal with.
Carol Russo, thank you. Mike Gardner.
This idea of using the government to coerce choice on a moral question, on a personal question, is a wrong move. All my life I've seen young women turned away, really, by a hard line. What women need in that circumstance is an understanding, reasonable person to talk to. And our law, this is a republic, our law protects a right to privacy. And we all feel that right to privacy when it's threatened in any way. We don't want the government in our medical offices.
Mr. Robio.
Well, I think he made a terrible mistake by only consulting one person. Somebody told me that. I certainly would have considered talking to 2 or 3 other people to get an opinion about that, and I think he's terribly wrong. Rape is a terrible thing, and people say, well, but how about the poor women that got raped and had babies? Well, the statistics say 192 women were questioned about that same question. 69% of them had the babies or made plans for adoption, and the rest of them had abortions. Every one of the ones that had the abortion said it was a terrible mistake, and they only added to the trauma.
Thanks. Mike Riley.
To answer the specific question, I think his comments were bizarre and offensive, and I don't support them in any way. I am a pro-life guy, but I believe that maybe he should not consider running for office. I'm not asking him to resign. I'm just surprised he's in the race.
Final word, Carol Russo.
Michael Gardner, I'd like to say, how can you consider the murder of a human being a medical decision? The only reason it's legal is because of the Roe v. Wade decision, which was a 7-2 decision, where they just decided arbitrarily, we're going to say that the baby isn't a person. Well, the Dred Scott decision, a little earlier in our nation's history, was also a 7-2 decision, and they wanted to say that the African American is only 3/5 of a person. Well, that was seen as obviously immoral, obviously wrong, and that was overturned. And to call the killing of an innocent human being created by God a medical decision, I think is deplorable.
Okay, we're moving on. My colleague Andrew Gobeil, who has joined us, and Andrew will have a question for Mr. Gardner.
All right, Mr. Gardner, thanks for joining us. By the way, you might want to check out your website as well. If you're going to be critical of Mr. Riley, you've got a number of grammar mistakes and misspellings in there as well. So it's just the grammar police calling you out on that.
Well,
so you may want to take a look at that. And this is a question that I'd like to obviously ask specifically of you, but addresses all of you, and the disconnect between the Republican Party nationally and what's going on. And we'll use as the topic immigration. The numbers vary, as we all know, 9, 10, 11, 20 million people, some say, are illegal immigrants here in the United States today. Do you agree, Mr. Gardner, with the belief that it's just not viable to deport them all? And if so, what can be done about them, especially in relation to those who have attempted through legal means to gain citizenship here in the United States?
Well, I think it's completely impractical to imagine deporting 9, 10, 11, 12 million people, whatever the number is. And also, let's face it, we've invited that labor into this country in many circumstances. We do have systemic alien verification for entitlements, which is a federal sort of E-Verify type thing to prevent these people getting onto benefits. So we have administrative measures to control the cost of illegal immigration, but ultimately we need immigration reform that provides pathways. I mean, if you share my American dream, I want to share it with you.
Okay. Mr. Robio.
Just about everybody here is an immigrant one way or another. And I think the problem is that we should close the borders. We should find companies that are hiring illegals severely to make an example so other companies will divest themselves of their illegals, and people that are harboring them too. You know, everybody came here and did it the right way. Sheriff Arpaio says there's approximately 1,700 illegals entering the country every week. And out of them, well, actually it's 3,000. He said 1,700 are either criminals or are coming here with mental illness or serious diseases.
Thank you, Mr. Rubio. Mr. Riley.
Immigration is a serious problem, and it needs comprehensive reform. And I've had a kind of a tug at my heartstring here. I don't like what Obama did with regard to making a statement that that extracted the DREAM Act provision that he wanted out of what was Congress's want. But I do sympathize with the idea that there are those people in the United States that are very similar to what the refugees were in other wars, and we need to have a heart and think about, in a compassionate way, how we deal with them that may actually include, at some point, a path to citizenship.
Carol Russo.
I support the Catholic Church's position, which is to have a path to citizenship. So I think that for the people that are here, we need to have a way that they can become citizens and to do it legally and to make it, you know, something that's achievable for them. But I do think that we have to secure our borders, and that, you know, it's basically part of a communist tactic to sort of flood our country with you know, illegal immigration, to sort of blur the lines between, you know, our country, Mexico and Canada, sort of turn us into a North American one continent, which is kind of going towards and ultimately like a one world order.
Final word, Mike Gardner.
I'd like to take a moment to respond to Mr. Gobiel's comment on the website. I commented on Mr. Riley's, the substance of his economic program, and you talked about spell checking. Well, let me talk about my economic program. I believe we have three central worries. Foreclosures, highest in New England, 19th in the country. We have some of the highest health insurance premiums in the country. Year after year increases really tax our economy. And gasoline prices. We here in the Northeast rely on a foreign, overseas supply of oil, which costs more than American oil, and we need to improve our supply line.
Okay, let's keep that topic. My question for Don Rubio is going to stay. What are we going to do to bring more jobs to the 2nd District? Jobs are the biggest issue facing us. We're a constant laggard here in Rhode Island. Our unemployment is among the highest in the country.
Well, you know,
what are we going to do?
We could do something like FDR did back in World War II when he got a gathering of the nation's biggest CEOs and business people together to brainstorm and blitz. How can we do this? How can we bring people and jobs and into Rhode Island? And I think that the best way to do that is to form a coalition of Rhode Island CEOs and businessmen and see what they can do. This used to be the most diversified industrial state in the Union. Now, you know, there's nothing here. It's all going to China. Something like 41,000 factories have left here. And probably another way to look at it would be taxes for people that are sending businesses overseas, to give them a little bit relief so they'll bring it back. This is the worst friendly tax country in the world. So that's what I think could do and might bring about some changes.
Mr. Riley.
Don's right about corporate tax rates in general for the United States, and he's also right, in fact, that the United States is going to be the answer to Rhode Island's job problems, not Rhode Island itself. But let's talk about Rhode Island itself. Rhode Island, according to the Center for Freedom and Prosperity report that I have here, fails at nearly every single category of 11 categories of business friendliness. We're not a business-friendly state. If we want jobs, we have to address each of these items, which are tax burden, business climate, regulatory climate, K-12 education. We have an education problem here in Rhode Island. It's not something that we're going to fix overnight to fix the job situation, but the structural problems exist here. That's why I want to go to the U.S. to help support Rhode Island growth.
Ms. Russo.
What we need to do, and this is on a national level, but it will affect Rhode Island immensely, is we have to stop sending all of our jobs to communist nations, including China. The way to do that is to reestablish our trade tariffs. Things like NAFTA and CAFTA, these were treasonous to our nation, because now manufacturing plants obviously can make everything so much cheaper in nations like China and Indonesia and Vietnam. So obviously they're going to move their plants to where they can get cheaper labor and keep the cost down on their products. So not only is this devastating all of our manufacturing plants, actually we've lost 56,000 manufacturing plants just since 2001 when China entered the World Trade Organization, but also all of those people are losing their jobs, losing their money. They're not able to spend that in our economy.
Don Rubio.
Well, I agree. The problem is, it started back, I think, with NAFTA when everybody started leaving here. Rhode Island is the 50th most friendly business state out of 50 states. We can't get any worse than that, can we? And the fact that there is cheaper labor overseas and everything. I looked around my house today just to see. I couldn't find anything that was made in America. I'm talking about from toothbrushes to razor blades, microwave ovens and everything. There's just nothing being manufactured here, and that's what our problem is.
Thank you. You're listening to the WPRO primary debates. You are hearing tonight from the four Republicans who are vying for the nomination in the 2nd Congressional District, Michael Riley, Michael Gardner, Cara Russo, and Donald Robio, who are joining us. The program, the primary debates, brought to you uninterrupted by Dunkin' Donuts. America runs on Dunkin'. Again, we thank you for joining us. Thank everyone for joining us tonight. Turn to my colleague, Tara Granahan, a question for Mr. Riley, if you could, please.
Indeed. Most of you have gotten caught up in the world of PolitiFact, which many of our listeners know in the Providence Journal. You state something as fact, whether it be the cost of Obamacare, Mr. Riley got called out on that, the change in climate after 9/11, Mr. Gardner got caught up in that, and Ms. Russo was involved in a little going back and forth there. Mr. Robio, on the other hand, it's tough to find anything that you've said publicly or published. So maybe that's your strategy. Stay out of PolitiFact. But we'll get to that in just a moment. But my question, Mr. Riley, is it just a lot of spewing of GOP talking points these days? And do you really know how to walk the walk as opposed to just talk the talk?
I believe, and my parents believe, and taught me to believe in independent thought. I'm a very independent thinker. But I also read a lot. And when I see a number coming out from a credible source, like the Ryan campaign, like the Romney campaign, and it says $716 billion, I know this is a vetted number. And if PolitiFact wants to choose their friends and family to decide that that's not a credible number, that's their own business. I happen to have not a lot of respect for PolitiFact.
Cara Russo.
I've read some of the PolitiFacts, and I think that they are politically motivated. I've never actually been the target of one. I think that's because they don't want to actually give me any exposure in the paper, because people would see my name one way or the other. So, I mean, I guess it depends on who is writing the story, but I think that from what I've seen, they've been pretty politically motivated.
Gotcha. Michael Gardner.
There's a proverb, a wise man loves to be chastised. All my points in PolitiFact, even I was the first pants off fire, but it was a point well taken.
You say that with pride.
You know why? Because it was a point well taken. They acknowledged in the article that Democrats really did vote against the border fence because people would have to go to longer distances and get hurt. You know, I said to get hurt going around it. I was pithy, and it really Jim hadn't specifically said that, so it was a fair ding on me. But you learn from the criticism. The next one was I said it cost. It cut. No, it was just false. It was a false. They said it cost a half. Well,
Half truth.
It was a half truth, but you'll find that in mind. The points are well taken, and I always respond to PolitiFact respectfully because I value what they do.
Don Robio.
Well, I guess that's why they say when you go to court to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, right? When I try to do anything, I don't take my information from one source. I try and gather the information from as many sources as I can, and then you quote that, and they're going to be pretty accurate that way. So I did the same thing with all the issues I figured we'd be talking about tonight. I didn't just go to one place. And the bad part about it is, these politicians can get out there and say anything they want, and people are believing it. I talked to a woman today that said, oh my God, I hope the Republicans don't get in because I won't have any health care at all.
Have to leave it there. Final thought on the issue, Michael Riley?
Well, am I supposed to ask somebody else, or am I free
Final
to
thought
say
on
whatever
Final
I
thought
want?
on Tara's question.
Well, I actually came across a tape the other day where Jim Langevin was spewing out the biggest lie of 2011, according to PolitiFact, but Jim Langevin never got called out on that. I don't understand how this thing works. You just pick one person and call them out? Do you pick everybody that repeats that lie and call them out? I think there's a lot of politics in when they decide to do something.
Thank you. I turn to my colleague Andrew Gobiel. A question for Ms. Russo, if you could.
Mr. Russo, Tara and I frequently discuss on the show the status of the Republican Party here in Rhode Island, and I think weak would be a kind description of what is going on with that right now. Why is that the case, and where do you stand as far as the Republican Party and its national leaders, and how do you expect to work with them when perhaps they may not be walking in lockstep with the voters here in Rhode Island?
I feel, as far as the Rhode Island GOP, I'm a friend of Mark Scaria. I respect him. I do think that the Rhode Island GOP has gotten very far to the left of Republicans in general, based on social issues. So you see a lot of Republicans who are really pro-abortion, pro-same-sex marriage. By the way, I am the only person running in this race, and excuse me, I'm not sure, Donald, if you are also against same-sex marriage, but of Michael Gardner, Michael Riley, and myself, I am the only candidate who's actually against same-sex marriage. And I feel on the national level, I mean, I'm somebody who works well with people on both sides of the aisle. I'm not somebody who is going to support every candidate, but what I do support are the issues that I stand on, and I would work to get those furthered.
Michael Gardner.
Well, I think Kara Russo is a delightful person personally, but I don't see her working well on both sides of the aisle at all. Her positions on social issues are extremely to the right and not representative of Rhode Island. I think the GOP probably should take a little criticism from Governor Chafee last night. The GOP in Rhode Island should be the center. That's what it was when I was growing up. The GOP was the center, and now it has really gone to the right. My opponent here is carrying around an Ayn Rand binder. I mean, I don't care about Ayn Rand. I care about the Constitution, the laws.
John Robio.
Well, to answer Kara's question, yes, I am against same-sex marriage, and I am pro-life.
I'm glad to hear that.
And I believe that the Republican Party is not going way to the left. I think the Republican Party in Rhode Island should be where it is. I read an article which was very disturbing, and maybe Michael Riley can clear this up for me, that the director of the party is a woman who voted for Obama. Is that true?
The director of what party?
Of the Rhode Island GOP?
Okay, question, Mr. Riley. Andrew's the question here. You can use your time to either answer it or
I don't
answer
know
the
what you're
question.
asking me, and I don't know what the question was anymore.
The disconnect between I'm glad it was that good. The disconnect between the Republican Party, the moderate wing, as Mr. Gardner said, of the Republican Party, and the more national conservative aspect of the Republican Party.
Well, for all my life, I believed in the same three simple things: limited government, free enterprise, free markets. Those extend to individual liberty. Now, that happens to be what I identify with being a Republican. I grew up when I was young in Reagan country, so maybe I'm a Reagan Republican. It doesn't matter to me. To me, Chafee was not a Republican. Chafee was something else. He even decided he wasn't a Republican. He left, and guess what? He's decided he's a Democrat. He doesn't represent conservative values.
Kara Russo.
My slogan for my campaign is "Let's bring Rhode Island back to life," and I think that I am the most qualified person and the most qualified Republican to do that. For 7 years, I was the director of marketing at the Ryan Center, which is a $54 million facility at URI. Before that, I was the advertising and sales manager at the Dunkin' Donuts Center. Before that, I worked at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. I served on the South Kingstown Chamber of Commerce, the South County Tourism Council, and I currently produce 2 statewide television shows. For years, I've been a community leader, and I fight for religious freedom. It was Christopher Young and I that are the ones that really led the fight to keep up the Cranston West Prayer Banner. We organized thousands of people to come to the meetings and speak out.
Thanks, Kara. We're going to move on. Next questions for Michael Gardner. Let's talk of national politics here. Mitt Romney, the standard bearer for the party. Outline maybe some differences you might have with Mitt Romney.
Number one, let it fall on foreclosure crisis, completely inappropriate for Rhode Island. We're number one in New England, 19th in the country. We were always one of the country, that's just one. We need to solve that foreclosure crisis, and Republicans, of all people, should know real estate and good places to live like Rhode Island always comes back. We should be mitigating and extending time. That's the currency we can all afford. Just give people time, and we can work that out. Another area, the idea of I disagree with the talking point on Medicare. I simply do. It hasn't proved out, and it's a vulnerability to be saying something that's not factually correct.
Mr. Rubio.
I don't agree. I think his ideas as far as Medicare goes is very good, and I agree with the part about the housing situation. What we have to do in Rhode Island is bring back the whole situation. It's just gone completely out of control. We need help. And I think the federal government should step in that one particular instance. I don't want the government involved in everything, but I don't see how we can survive this by ourselves. The property values are still dropping. My neighbors are still losing their homes. It hasn't stopped, no matter what they say. It isn't true. It has not stopped. It's still going on.
Mr. Riley.
Government is absolutely not the solution to the housing problems. In fact, when Dodd-Frank came out as a reform measure, one of their main goals was to deal with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. Well, guess what? They're in receivership. They're still there. They're even bigger than before. We have an FHA. We're lending money at 2%, with a 2% down payment. We're lending at very low interest rates. I don't know how much more you can do to try to incentivize the home purchase. We don't need to do anything in Rhode Island. In fact, we need to get the federal government out of this business.
Ms. Russo.
What we need to do is to stop our congressional delegation in Rhode Island and actually all over the country, legislators, from basically being traitors to our country and deregulating the banks and financial institutions, which is causing the entire problem and the housing market collapse. Like in Rhode Island, Jack Reed, who was not only on the Senate Banking Committee, but he actually served as the chairman of the subcommittee that was directly overseeing interest rate derivatives and the issues that were directly involved with the banks. He took $3 million in campaign contributions from the banks, and at the same time, he voted to repeal the Glass-Steagall Act, which deregulated the same financial institutions and banks that he just took money from, and that's bribery.
Final word, Mike Gardner. Again, the question was difference with Mitt Romney. I think maybe we can revisit it at some point, but nevertheless, it turned to housing and foreclosure.
The government led us into the housing crisis with bad policy in numerous ways, just bad tax policy, and business took advantage of every incentive created by bad tax policy. Now, Mr. Riley clearly doesn't understand because he lives by the shore in Narragansett. You know, a foreclosure sign in Narragansett is a for sale sign, but a foreclosure in Warwick, Cranston, Providence, Kent County, South County, many poor parts of South County, that is blight. It's rats. It's a reduced revenue base for the cities and towns. It is a complete disconnect to say you do nothing about it.
We'll turn to my colleague, Tara Granahan. Tara, a question for Mr. Rubio, if you could, please.
Mr. Rubio, and this is for everyone really, if for some reason tomorrow morning you have some situation pop up, it's finances with the campaign or maybe a family emergency, and you cannot run for this seat any longer as of tomorrow, who at this table do you support? If not you, who and why?
Well, I really don't know that much about any one of the three candidates. I've been to all their websites, and this is the first debate that I've been to. So I really can't answer that question. I don't have enough information.
Okay, we'll answer the question. Mr. Riley.
Who would I support if I had to support any one of these three? I'd support Don Rubio.
But he doesn't even know who you are.
He doesn't need to know who I am for me
Why
to
would you
support
support him?
Because Don seems to have a lot of experience, a lot of background. He has an interest in running for office. He understands the issues of checking his own facts, as he said earlier. He seems to be a well-rounded, solid guy. He's not way left. He's not way right. It seems to be a good guy.
Carol Russo.
I can't answer that question. I can't support anybody who supports the radical same-sex agenda, which includes same-sex marriage, so I would not be able to support either Michael Riley or Michael Gardner. I do appreciate Donald Rubio's, that he's pro-family and he's pro-man-woman marriage. Are you also pro-life, Don Rubio? And I appreciate that. But I still... even if I wasn't running, I think I would still vote for myself just as a, just as a vote in favor of a pro-life, pro-religious freedom, pro-family person who I know that I will really fight to uphold the Constitution and our freedoms that are being under attack every single day in our nation.
Michael Gardner.
If I'm not if I didn't win the primary, I will support the primary winner. If that is Mr. Riley, I will support Mr. Riley because he's a member of the Republican Party. Our parties are an important part of our political process. In 2010, I supported the winner of the primary. I'd do the same this time. And here's why. I have strong disagreements with Mr. Riley on his limited government, which is a confusion on express powers. I think he's way too far to the right on many issues and doesn't know Rhode Island the way I do. But he's smart, and he can be convinced.
Don Rubio, absolutely.
I would also support whoever wins the primary, definitely without any question.
My colleague Andrew Gobiel, question as we move on down for Cara Russo, if you could, please.
Okay, all right, I get Cara Russo again. In January, the Romney campaign left open the possibility that Governor Romney's offshore banking accounts may have been used to defer taxes. That was a statement he refuted in a Fox interview last month. Last night, Governor Ted Strickland at the DNC said that candidate Romney lacks, this is an interesting quote, economic patriotism in making these purely legal investments. Do you have a problem with the presidential candidate making these investments, and has your party standard bearer been transparent with his finances? Do you think he should release more of his tax returns?
I think that as a candidate in the past, people haven't been asked to divulge more information. So I'm not sure whether they're holding him to an equal standard. However, I don't think that he is forthcoming on social issues. For example, in Massachusetts, the Goodridge decision that quote unquote legalized same-sex marriage in 2003 was just a legal opinion by the state Supreme Court of Massachusetts. And they said, we can't change this law. It's one man, one woman in Massachusetts, but we don't think it's right, but we can't change it. But Mitt Romney took it upon himself to force all of the town clerks and justices of the peace to, they had to comply with this new quote-unquote law, even though it was not a law.
Mr. Riley.
I'm glad the person, who was it that brought this up?
Who am I?
No, not you. I know who you are. You're Andrew.
Ted Strickland.
Ted Strickland.
Yes.
I'm glad he brought up the issue of taxes because a lot of people are doing things on the edge of legality. I'm not suggesting Mitt Romney is, and I don't think he is, and I don't think he's required to issue his tax returns. But you know what we should do? Simplify taxes. Get the whole cheating game out of there. What's going on in the federal government is a whole lobbyist to politician circle of corruption. That's why I only want to be down there 6 years. I have a term limit. The guy that's in there right now is going on his 13th year. This is not a place to go and get rich. It's a place for someone that's done well, or even that cares a lot, like Michael Gardner cares a lot.
Speaking to Michael Gardner.
Well, I think Mr. Romney's been running for president for a long time. I just think it would be a monkey off his back if he simply released his returns. I can't believe that there's anything untoward going on. He's been running for president forever, and he's in an honest legal profession. As far as simplification goes, that's a laudable objective. But the fact is right now, some of those simplification ideas are gimmicky. Some people have real issues about fairness, and it's a very big topic to take on when first we have to solve foreclosures, health care reform, etc.
Mr. Rubio.
Well, if this administration wasn't so, I can't even think of a word that I want to explain it to, but they force people to invest out of the country. If they kind of relax things and think the people will invest here, but also, didn't Romney release 2 years of his taxes?
He has.
Yes. Well, I would say if I was Mr. Romney, I would say to him, I tell you what, I'll release even more than that if you tell us why your Social Security record is sealed, your Harvard record is sealed, your record in New York at the university is sealed. Why is everything sealed? Even the Selective Service record is sealed.
Ms. Russo.
I was just talking to Donald, telling him, he did release the 2 years. I don't really have a rebuttal except for to say that, I think that being forthcoming is extremely important in all areas, but people should not be held to a double standard. So if they're going to ask, one candidate to release, they need to do that all the way down the line and not to just, attack people on issues that they think that they can hurt them the most on.
And the questions continue. This one from Mr. Riley. On your website, you discussed being in New York for 9/11. Your thoughts on the government's policy of detaining suspected terror suspects at detention facility?
You mean Guantanamo?
Exactly, yes.
Well, I think that was, it's pretty clear that it's a necessary thing to do because if it wasn't, Mr. Obama, who promised to get rid of it, would have done it. So I don't think we know all the facts as to why that is, how many lives were saved through the use of that. And I assume that if I were put in the place of being president, I would come to the same conclusion.
Cara Russo, what are your thoughts? Government's policy, suspected terrorists?
Well, I can tell you that I am strongly against the National Defense Authorization Act, which Langevin voted for, which is H.R. 4310, which it decimates the Fourth Amendment and allows for the indefinite detention of U.S. citizens. All they have to do is say, well, we think you're a terrorist, and they can call anybody that. If you're a veteran, if you're pro-life, if you're someone who speaks out against war, anything. Oh, we're going to say you're a terrorist. And then they have the right now, under the National Defense Authorization Act, which Langevin voted for, to seize that U.S. citizen with no trial, no right to a lawyer, and hold them indefinitely. And I am definitely against that.
Michael Gardner.
Gitmo is a response to war, and war is ugly and it's nasty. Human rights demands that the key is a case review. There has to be some sort of, this is quasi-war, so there has to be some sort of case review for the sake of human rights. But it's war, and so it's not going to be as clean and simple as just shutting down Gitmo and ending this practice and that practice.
Mr. Robio.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. I think that we have to come up with some way of identifying these people. They say, oh, you can't do this and you can't do that, you can't retain people. And I agree that you just can't pick somebody up off the street and arrest them and hold them as a terrorist. But, sometimes these people are very visible, and it screams out to investigate them, but our hands are tied and we can't do it. So I think the laws should be actually relaxed a little more instead of tightened in that particular area.
Final thoughts, Mr. Riley?
Yeah, I agree with Kara's comments on the NDAA and Langevin's vote on that. It is concerning that got through in the appropriations bill, and that those two items that she identified would detain American citizens without a chance of trial.
And Langevin also voted for it in 2012 as well.
Okay, let's...
Yeah. So I just want to echo that I agree with that. To me, that was a separate question when I thought you were asking about Guantanamo.
Gotcha. You're listening to the WPRO primary debates. This is the final of the two debates that we're holding before the primary. The four Republicans vying for the nomination in the 2nd Congressional District. Joining us tonight, Michael Riley, Michael Gardner, Cara Russo, and Donald Robio. The WPRO primary debates brought to you uninterrupted by Dunkin' Donuts. America runs on Dunkin'. We also want to remind our interactive listeners you can join 6:30 WPRO personality, staff, and listeners for a live tweet chat during the debate by logging on to 630WPRO.com and following the link to a live chat, or logging on to your Twitter account and use the hashtag WPRO debate. Feel free. We have arrived at the point of the debate where the candidates can spend the last 15 minutes or so of the debate asking questions of the other. We ask, and we agreed before the debate, that the candidates would limit themselves to policy questions and not to unverifiable personal attacks aimed at other candidates. So fair enough, we'll move on. We'll start with a question. I believe Mr. Gardner is up. You can ask a question of any of your three colleagues here.
Well, ask Mr. Riley a question. Mr. Riley, you've sold your candidacy on the theory that your unique experience as an Amex options specialist, which you call being a businessman, particularly qualifies you to solve the economic challenges facing this nation. But when I listen to your campaign, you say, well, when I was in business, we used to just demand a 5% cut year after year.
Mike, we're going to need a question.
So, if we've already got 10% cuts on the table because of the sequester, does your candidacy, how does that justify your candidacy to call for a 5% cut? Is that unique?
That was a mumbled question, but what I think really is going on here is you're trying to ask what my experience is. And my experience is far more than being an Amex options specialist. I have started and financed dozens of businesses. Because I don't list them on my website so that you can figure it out is not what I'm talking about. When I refer to my business experience, owning and operating and hiring people, that's not being an Amex trader. By the way, I am very proud of my role as an Amex trader. That's an independent, competing against Goldman Sachs, competing against Merrill Lynch, and beating them as an independent, as one person. But I also started businesses, created jobs, and guess what? I moved to Rhode Island and started a job. I started a business here in Rhode Island in 2005. And that business was a brand new business. It was an investment advisory business that won national awards, 2 national awards, for the best performing fund in the United States. Thank you for bringing that
Let's
up.
move down the panel. Cara Russo.
I'm sorry, can you,
Your thoughts on Mr. Gardner's question?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, Michael.
I asked him if all he's proposing is a 5% cut. How does that derive from his enormous experience?
I actually don't know enough about Michael Riley's experience. I've heard you talk about it and say it has a lot to do with, I don't want to say insider trading, but that type of thing. I don't want to comment on somebody's experience when I haven't, I don't have all the facts, and so I'm actually not going to.
Mr. Rubio.
It seems like he's been conducting his business affairs in a very honorable manner to me, and I don't have any criticism for that.
Mr. Gardner.
Well, I would just simply point out that, the candidacy has been sold on the expertise. And the fact of it is, asking for a 5% cut year after year, well, actually, it's more than 5% in the second year. How would that impact Rhode Island?
Mr. Riley.
I don't know this 5% cut he's referring to, but my experience is sold on the 35 years of financial experience, including 22 years on Wall Street in the most competitive environment in the world, a highly regulated environment, I might add. And if there were any issues, they would have come out. There are no issues. I've started and operated businesses. I came to Rhode Island and started a completely new business, and I outperformed again. It's experience, it's success, it's getting the job done. That's what I've done. That's what I proved. This 5% that you keep referring to is in your head somewhere.
Okay, we'll move on. Mr. Rubio, a question directed to any of your three colleagues here.
Well, I was wondering I'll ask Cara, what do you think about the Obama's having Kerry run through the Senate these days, trying to get the law of the sea treaty passed? He was going to wait until after he was elected, but then he figured he might not get elected.
I am absolutely against the law of the sea treaty, and I think that it's just another way to gain control of U.S. waters and I know this sounds conspiratorial when I say these words, but it is in fact true that they are trying to move us towards a centralization of power, which is really ultimately towards a one-world government. That's what organizations like the United Nations are about. That's why we have a European Union. That's why we're moving towards a North American Union, which is why I was explaining earlier about how immigration plays a part in that, mass immigration, to sort of remove a feeling of national identity that people have so they can more easily assimilate into kind of a larger conglomerate where they can just have one currency, control people easier, and the law of the sea treaty, to answer your question, Donald, is part and parcel with that agenda.
Mr. Gardner.
Sorry, what would you like me to speak to?
The question?
Which
Mr. Russo's reply, the question again, the sea treaty?
What do you think
the
of
sea
the
treaty.
law of the sea
The law of
treaty?
the sea treaty, I studied that in law school. Thank you. I studied the law of the sea treaty in law school. President Reagan decided that we shouldn't go that way. And frankly, I agreed with that decision. I know there's a lot of pressure, though, to do so. But in my opinion, it is really a senatorial issue. But in my opinion, I have grave reservations because I don't really see us wanting to turn over a lot of wealth to other nations based on really an immature international government. One day, maybe we'll have a more mature international government, but I don't see it right now.
Mr. Riley.
I believe in the sovereignty of the United States, and the law of the sea treaties threatens that sovereignty. I am totally against it. I believe in the comments that Michael Gardner just made are correct, that it's an immature world, not that it necessarily ever has to go away from the U.S. being in charge of its own sovereignty, but it's an immature world structure to even be considering it.
Mr. Rubio.
Yeah, well, the law of the sea treaty will put the control of all the oceans, everything in them and under them, under the control of the UN, which is completely ridiculous. They would be able to tell us where we can dock our fleets, when they can go to sea, and even worse than that is all the fishermen up and down both coasts and the Gulf Coast, they can say the engine in your boat is spewing too much fumes, you can't go out today, or you can only fish 2 days a week, or you can only take so much lobster this week or this month. It's just giving too much power to the United Nations.
Ms. Russo.
That's right. It is absolutely giving that power to the United Nations, which is an undermining of American sovereignty, and it gives our oil resources to other nations. And by the way, Langevin voted to give offshore oil drilling rights to foreign nations.
We move on. The questions, I believe Mr. Riley's up. Question for your
So I
three
can ask
colleagues.
anybody anything right now.
Three colleagues, as long as we can verify it and it's not a verifiable personal attack.
Well, I don't have a personal attack for anybody, obviously, but I would like, Michael, I've heard you say some really interesting things, and I appreciate the fact that you're a big thinker. But I wonder if you don't focus on the economy as much as I do. Is there a reason? Do you place something as more important? Did you say healthcare is more important than the economy right now?
I think your suggestion that I don't focus on the economy as much as you do is absurd. In 2010, I used to hand out cards saying that, you know, if we got a reduction, a 10% reduction in health insurance premiums, it would be like a stimulus. It would be bigger than those 2007 checks. We needed to find resources to stimulate the economy without increasing the debt. My plan to mitigate foreclosures increases confidence without increasing the federal debt. My plan to improve the supply line for fuels improves the economy without increasing the federal debt. And also acting upon health insurance reform and lowering that cost improves the economy without increasing the debt.
Mr. Rubio.
Well, I think the problem with the economy is that the Obama administration just doesn't understand anything about how to run a nation or how to run a business. He wants to increase the taxes on 2% of the people that pay 90% of the taxes now. How much should they pay? 95%? 98%? You know, where does it end? These are the entrepreneurs and the business people, small, medium, and large, that create jobs. Government doesn't create jobs. I think it's about time he realized that. But he wants to spend another $1 trillion because he said the problem with Greece is they just didn't spend enough.
Ms. Russo.
Well, I certainly focus on the economy in addition to social issues, and I feel that what Obama's done with Obamacare, and by the way, Chris Young and I, we actually walk the walk, not just talk the talk. We actually go out. We were in 2009 at the Warwick Town Hall meeting, you know, speaking loudly out against Obamacare. It's going to remove $716 billion from Medicare, by the way. And you know, we actually take action on these issues. We sound the alarm. We give the information. People don't believe it at first, and then they say later, "Hey, you were right about that."
Mr. Riley.
Am I supposed to comment on my first comment?
You can continue on. Yeah. Mr. Gardner's going to get the last word, but
clearly the economy is the most important issue, and it's not necessarily important that Mike and I agree exactly what the economy is. We're in dead last here in Rhode Island. In the United States, we're in crisis mode. In Europe, they're in crisis mode. What the entire focus of everybody that's going into Congress should be on the economy. Mr. Langevin has no such focus, no such experience, no such proclivity. Mr. Langevin, since he came into office, Rhode Island unemployment has gone from 5.1% to 11.1%. He seems to be virtually oblivious to the municipal crisis that's happening in the state, and has never even talked about it.
Mr. Gardner.
Mr. Riley's website on page 1 describes employing pro-growth solutions while getting our fiscal house in order. I just don't find a lot of material in the website beyond that naked statement, pro-growth solutions. I assume you might be talking about continued tax cuts, Bush-era tax cuts. Well, we have a consensus on that, except for 2% of Americans. So I'm not sure what he's talking about.
We'll move on to Carol Russo. Ms. Russo, a question for your three colleagues on the panel here.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm going to ask Michael Gardner. Considering the fact that it has been proven by many national experts, such as Dr. Angela Lanfranchi, Dr. Gerard Nadal, that abortion actually causes breast cancer, and it actually was abortion and also the birth control pill was classified by the World Health Organization in 2005 as a Class 1 carcinogen, meaning definitely cancer-causing. Other examples of Class 1 carcinogens being asbestos and formaldehyde.
Respectfully,
asbestos
I need a question
formaldehyde.
from Mr. Gardner.
And considering also the fact that Hitler said that he wanted to use abortion as a way to reduce the population, he wanted to eliminate the Slavic population, and he even promoted
Ms.
using
Russo,
the term women's
again,
health.
I need a question.
Why would you support abortion and also the birth control pill?
I completely object to your characterization of me supporting abortion, and there are many people who have resolved to be pro-choice who absolutely do not support abortion and would not have one. What they are recognizing is that there are limits to our government. If we're going to be Republicans and talk about limited government, then it goes into the bedrooms and our sex lives. And you know, it was God who put the child in the woman's womb. The Roe versus Wade decision struggles with this issue. Our high court struggled with it and resolved it. It is settled.
Mr. Riley.
I'm pro-life, contrary to what Kara might believe. I'm also pro-traditional marriage.
In the State of the State debate, you said that you were in favor of same-sex.
What I said in the State of the State debate, hopefully I said, and if you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that I believe it's a states' rights issue, and that civil unions were the decided issue in
No, Michael
July of
Gardner
2000.
had said it was an issue of equality.
Carrie,
You said because of
Ms.
that.
Russo, again, you got to go ahead, finish your thought, please.
Well, hopefully you're not inferring from what I agreed with Michael Gardner, because I don't remember what that was. But if you want to go back and play the tape, that's fine with you. What I am telling you,
Same-sex marriage? Why don't you say it right now?
All right.
I just told you what I was.
We're going to move on, Mr.
Civil unions were decided in 2011. It's a
Mr.
states' rights issue.
Mr. Robio, what are your thoughts, please? Kara, excuse me, Mr. Robio.
No idea
Mr.
what to
Robio.
say. They've got me confused. Okay, what I'd like to say is I'm pro-life, if that's what you're trying to find out. I'm definitely against abortion. Women that have had abortions are 6 times more prevalent to commit suicide than women that didn't.
That's right.
Okay? And 2.85% of the women that have had abortions die from other causes than women that didn't have abortions. So I'm definitely against that 100%.
Kara Russo.
To add to what Donald said, you have a greatly increased risk of breast cancer, definitely. Also depression, suicide, placenta previa, uterine laceration. I want to let people know that if you're somebody who's had an abortion or helped someone have an abortion, that does not mean that you have to be pro-abortion now. That's like if you stole something when you were younger, meaning you always have to be in favor of theft. The abortion industry wants to make you feel like that. And it's really like the devil telling you, you have no choice. We're the only ones you can come to. You can never be forgiven. And that's wrong, because God will forgive you. So you don't have to hold on to that. Just let go of it and realize that.
Mike Gardner. Mike Gardner.
All of these scientific representations are part of informed consent for the patient. Informed consent for the patient, for the woman herself to know. And she can discuss it with her priest, and hopefully she'll find reasonable voices that help her to choose life. But the government should not coerce that choice before the viability of the fetus.
Okay, we'll thank all the candidates right now. Like, do you think we're going to move on? No, Kara, you're not. We're going to move on to closing statements right now. We're going to move on to closing statements. We'd like to thank all of our candidates for coming here. Thank you as well to all of the people behind the scenes who have helped organize this debate. Cumulus Providence General Manager Barbara Haynes, WPRO Program Director Craig Schaub, as well as thanks to our engineering staff led by our chief, Duffy Egan, 630WPRO.com's Dita Quattro, who served as a producer of these debates. My colleagues on the WPRO Morning News, going to make sense of this tomorrow morning, Tara Granahan and Andrew Gobeil. As we started in alphabetical order with opening and closing statements, so we will begin with the gentleman who delivered the first statement. A final closing statement from Michael Gardner.
Thank you. On September 11th, please vote in the Republican primary. If you're an independent voter, please come in and vote for me. Why? The Republican Party in Rhode Island hasn't elected a statewide office holder. We're clearly going in the wrong direction. We need to become the center. Please come in and help me resurrect the supremacy of law and reason in our party. This is a republic. The law is over everyone, including our rulers. The law is supreme. Republicans should be all about that. We mustn't turn away. Please come in and vote for me on September 11th. Thank you.
And a closing statement now from Mr. Riley.
I am running the most serious campaign in the history of this seat over the last 15 years. I'm doing it because I believe in one thing, fixing the economy. I am by far the most qualified candidate in the state, as a matter of fact, to address this issue. Not only have I been experienced in actually running and operating businesses, I studied economics. I have I have a graduate certificate in financial planning. I studied business at the University of Connecticut, finance. I was an accounting major prior to that. I'm very concerned about the municipal conditions. I went into Narragansett and I addressed those on my own as a private citizen. It is deep within me to fix what the economic problems are here in Rhode Island, but they must start at the federal level, and they start with concepts that apparently a lot of people can't understand. They start with a strong dollar. The reserve currency of the United States is the most important thing that will affect our growth over the next 20 years. The next thing is tax reform, and finally, regulatory reform.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Moving on, a closing statement from Mr. Robio, please.
Well, this administration has been thumbing their noses at our Constitution and stepping on it right along. I'm going to Washington to try and protect and defend the Constitution, and for the way that our forefathers wrote it and intended that it would be used. They continue to dump on it, and he uses his executive privilege order to bypass the Congress every chance that he gets. So we have to do something to stop that from happening, even if he doesn't get in. Again, no president should have such sweeping orders that they can continually make them run around Congress and do whatever they want to do. That's called a kingdom. That's called tyranny. And you know, right now the people are afraid of our government. Government should be afraid of the people. When the people are afraid of the government, it's tyranny. When it's the other way around, it's called a democracy. So that's why I would like to go there, to try and change things back to the way that they should be and respect the Constitution the way it was intended.
Thank you, Mr. Rubio. And final statement from Cara Russo.
Hi, my name is Cara Russo, and my agenda is to bring Rhode Island back to life, to bring our businesses and manufacturing back to life in Rhode Island, to bring us back to a culture of life, and also to bring back justice and integrity back to life here in Rhode Island. Now is the time to fix our nation. Now is the time to fix Rhode Island. I want to say a quote by a communist dictator, Joseph Stalin, who said, "America is like a healthy body. Its resistance is threefold: its patriotism, its spiritual life, and its morality. If we can undermine these three things, we can destroy America from within." People, open your eyes and see how that is happening. There is a communist agenda, and believe me, the word communism, you can just sub in the word progressive. It's the same thing, to destroy our nation from within by breaking down religion, family, and population. And that's what they're doing through same-sex marriage, through abortion, through the ACLU, trying to remove God from every aspect of the public square. I want to say that I strongly disagree with Mike O'Reilly, who says that, you know, him having money and, you know, is the only thing that qualifies a credible campaign. I believe that the people of Rhode Island care about what the candidates have to say, that they don't care just about money, and that 30% straight party vote that he will get, please override that and vote for me, Cara Russo, on September 11th in the Republican primary.
Thank you, Cara Russo. Thank you, Cara Russo. Thank you, Donald Robio, Michael Gardner, Michael Riley. Thank you for coming out. It's a very good debate. Great to have you here as well. Of course, the primary is coming up next Tuesday, the 11th, and hopefully we'll see you all back for more WPRO debates as we head toward the fall election. My name is Bill Haberman. For my colleagues Tara Granahan and Andrew Gobiel, we thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll have a full roundup tomorrow morning on the WPRO Morning News and at 6:30, WPRO.com. Good night.
WEAN FM Wakefield Peacedale. WPRO. News on the hour, on the half, and when it breaks.